Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. Today, we are taking on the biggest topic we have ever tried to discuss on this channel, mega dungeons. And in just one episode, we are going to be talking about how to properly define what a mega dungeon is, why DMs love them, why they can be such a challenge to run, and before the end of the video, I'm going to give you the real secret to pulling off a mega dungeon campaign with modern players in this day and age. But to get started, we have to have a definition of exactly what we mean when we say mega dungeon. I've heard different people try to address it different ways on the internet, but I think the most important thing to understand, there are four kinds of dungeons that we run in Dungeons and Dragons, okay? The first kind of dungeon that we run is your basic lair, okay? A lair is, if you've seen the trend online of a 5-room dungeon, that's basically what a lair is. A lair is just a few rooms underground, one or maybe two monsters that is basically designed to be played through in a single night of play or even less, right? It's just a small little thing that you're going to go into and you're going to take care of right away. The next step up from a lair is what I call a one-map dungeon. Now, this isn't to be confused with a one-page dungeon. A one-page dungeon is a sort of exercise in restricting your options when writing, and you have to fit the map, the monsters, the story, the key, everything on one page. And your monster tables, your treasure tables, everything on one page. You can see those if you Google one-page dungeon. People get very creative with that sort of exercise. But when I say a one-map dungeon, what I'm talking about is a product where you've got maybe a 16, maybe 32-page product where the main map of the dungeon can be comfortably fit onto one page in the book, and then the rest of the book is basically just the key to running that dungeon. This is the Fane of the Night Serpent from Tomb of Annihilation. Obviously, it's part of a much larger product, but in and of itself, it is a good example of a one-map dungeon. The thing about a one-map dungeon, so this is designed to take 3 or 4 nights of play. Most one-map dungeons are. Like I say, 16, 32 pages, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the interesting thing about a dungeon like this, most modern design dungeons like this, they're keyed around one sort of idea or bad guy, right? So if you go into a one-map dungeon, this is the Hidden Halls of Hazakor, an excellent product that you can get out there. And when you go into a one-map dungeon, generally, if it's a beholder's stronghold, then the prisoners that you rescue are the beholder's prisoners. And the guards that you fight are the beholder's guards, and the treasure that you liberate is the beholder's treasure, right? A one-map dungeon is usually focused around one idea or theme. Hidden Halls of Hazakor is 68 pages long. It's a little expansive for a one-map dungeon, but it's an excellent, excellent product for both beginning DMs and first-level players. So you've got a lair, you've got a one-map dungeon, and then the next step up is what I call a 3 or maybe 4-map dungeon. The Forge of Fury is an excellent example of a 3-map dungeon. And this is a great adventure out of Tales from the Yawning Portal if you haven't run it. And what you can see here, they're kind of cheating because they fit this into about a third or a quarter of a page, this particular map. Obviously, you can fit any dungeon on one page if you scrunch it down far enough. But generally what I see is with a 3 or 4 map dungeon, you're looking at about 100-page product, somewhere in that neighborhood. And this is going to be a major chunk of your campaign. A 3-map dungeon is going to take you a couple levels to get through, and it becomes sort of a major set piece, memorable bit of your dungeon. It's not just a jump down in there and come back out. And the other thing that marks 3 and 4 map dungeons is designers start to get into this sort of variety is the spice of life thing, where they want to differentiate the different levels. You're not going to find a lot of modern 4-map dungeons where they're all the orc stronghold and it's just room after room after room full of orcs, right? You're going to have a level that's full of caves and maybe it has mushroom men on it. The top level is loaded with orcs and they're sort of organized and that kind of has a different feel. You get down into the sinkhole and it's mostly abandoned, if I remember correctly. You get to the foundry, and this is where the Durgar have taken over, and it's all worked stone and it's locked doors, and maybe you have a level that has a bunch of traps or puzzles or something like that. But when you get into 3 and 4 maps, you're starting to see this differentiation. And then of course you get to the Black Lake at the end of the adventure. Spoilers, a little late to tell you this is the climax of this adventure. And the designers are starting to sort of differentiate things out. Once you have more than 3 maps, or 4 maps, I should say, you are in Mega Dungeon territory. Now, I hear what you're saying. You're like, Henchman, that seems a little bit arbitrary. Like, just, oh, well, as soon as they put a 5th full-page map in their product, then, oh, we're in Mega Dungeon territory. Like, five maps it counts as a Mega Dungeon? No. Here's the thing. I'm not being arbitrary. I'm talking about a metaphysical reality of game designers and game publishing. Because here's what I found. Once you are working on a product and you have 4 maps that are all part of the same dungeon in that product, and you decide to add a 5th or a 6th level, invariably designers decide, you know what? Let's just go ahead and make it a Mega Dungeon. Like there's something about that 6th map where you're getting into 140, 150 pages and it's all part of one big setting. And designers are just all of a sudden like, you know what? We could just make a Mega Dungeon out of this. And Mega Dungeons have a gravimetric pull. Like, I don't know a single player, a single DM who at some point when they heard about how Arneson and Gygax would run their, original campaigns, and it's just this huge dungeon that goes down and down and down and down, right? I don't know a single DM that at some point hasn't thought to themselves, that would be awesome. I would love to run this campaign where I just keep adding levels and levels and levels to the map. And there's something about the idea that box is a level. That is a whole map. That could be multiple pieces of graph paper that I have scotched taped together to represent this level. And the players keep exploring and I keep adding to it and it just becomes more and more epic and cool. That is the attraction of the Mega Dungeon. And what I've found in publishing is generally once you get up to 5 maps, you just decide, let's go ahead and go all in and make ourselves a Mega Dungeon. So that's how I'm defining what counts as a Mega Dungeon. As you can tell, your old pal, the Henchman, loves Mega Dungeons. I'm just going to be showing you a little part of my collection of outstanding Mega Dungeons that I've got. This is a 3rd edition product. This is 13th Age, which is kind of an offshoot of 4th edition. But this is just an absolutely brilliant Mega Dungeon called The Stone Thief. The book is called Eyes of the Stone Thief. And brilliant idea, brilliant design. But anyway, I have all of these Mega Dungeons, and I am just so hyped up to get to run all of these things. I think it would be so great, right? But there's always this fear whenever you start to talk about running a Mega Dungeon. And that fear is the dreaded 4-letter word, slog. You're worried that your Mega Dungeon campaign is going to turn into a huge slog. And nobody wants that, right? Your players especially are just like, you're trying to describe this Mega Dungeon that's just layer after layer after layer. I love the 3D art in the Eyes of the Stone Thief, by the way, of all these encounters. And to them, it sounds like, so what you're saying is we're basically going to go down a hallway, bust open a door, go down another hallway, bust open a door, have an encounter. It's just this big collection of monster closets, right? That is the fear that your players are are thinking it might become like, right? And there is a breed, they're a dying breed, but there is a breed of old school D&D guys who they're here for it. They want to dungeon crawl. They want to experience the original Gygax Arneson experience, and they don't care. They just want to go room to room to room, gathering treasure and casting spells. And God love those grognards. I'm a little bit of a grognard myself. But there's this worry that our campaign is going to become a grind and that our players are not going to be here for it. So there's a solution to that problem that we tried in third edition ish that I don't think works, and now there's a solution that's coming out that before the end of the video I'm going to tell you about that I think does work. So the idea back in third edition, I think, was this idea, well, maybe the reason mega dungeons are so hard to pull off, maybe the reason players are sometimes turned off by them, is this fear that it's just an endless list of monster closets, right? They thought maybe the solution to running a mega dungeon is variety, right? Maybe the problem is we need to have everything in our mega dungeon that you would expect to see in any other campaign on the surface, right? I mean, this dungeon is designed to be a whole campaign. So why don't we have an area that's kind of like a city where the party can meet NPCs and use some of those interaction skills. Let's have a level that's a whole bunch of traps. Let's have a bunch of exploration. Let's include puzzle solving. Let's include factions. Let's include discovery and travel. Let's include everything in our mega dungeon that you would have in any other sort of surface campaign. And then we will have solved the grind problem. We will have solved the slog problem. That was our hope kind of back in third edition when we started publishing mega dungeons in that era, and it seemed like this was the holy grail. It seemed like this was going to solve all of our problems. Here's an excellent third edition mega dungeon called the Emerald Spire that was released by Paizo back in the day. Wonderful module where every level is a different superstar designer from the third edition days. Trying to see if I can find the big map of the whole thing. But we thought, oh, that's the solution. Let's get all the variety we can into the dungeon. And that works for some people, but it's still, some people are just turned off by the idea of a big mega dungeon, or they think it might work, but when they get in there, it turns into this grind, right? And to understand why, to understand what's really happening in mega dungeon design, we need to step back for a second and we need to look at how we design any other Dungeons and Dragons adventure. Okay, so to borrow a term from video games, what is the gameplay loop of your typical 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons adventure, right? So you're playing the first part of Rime of the Frost Maiden, right? You get to one of the 10 towns and you find out this town has a problem, right? Some fishermen are missing, or there are these winter wolves that are harassing us, right? You get a quest, you get a mission, right? And then you come to play, and basically, that's a little bit weird. This is supposed to represent tables, right? So this is supposed to be nights of gameplay, right? You get a quest. You go searching for the missing fishermen, you find out the cave that they got into, you go around there a little bit. By about the third session, you have figured out what happened to them, or you've rescued them or whatever. You return to that town, you get your reward, right? You turn the quest in, and then you go to a different town. And the story kind of advances a little bit, and you get a new quest, right? And you start to investigate it, you have a couple sessions, you get your reward, rinse and repeat, basically, right? And this sort of gameplay loop, most of us are big video game players by now. People who are playing 5th edition are mostly raised on video games anyway, and it's very familiar to us from video games, right? Now, sometimes, it's been pointed out to me, sometimes there is a big overarching quest that you're aware of from the very beginning of the video game or from the very beginning of the campaign. Well, we've got to kill Strahd and get out of Barovia, right? That's the reason we're here. We've got to figure out what's happening with the Everlasting Rime, and we've got to break the power of the Everlasting Rime on the 10 towns, or whatever it is. This big overarching quest. But in video games, and I have found in role-playing games, we still break it down into manageable quest chunks, right? That have a few sessions of play, and then we get the reward, even if the reward is just a new quest, but we feel like the story has advanced a little bit, and we feel like things are moving on, okay? Now, let's compare that to how we typically want to run a mega dungeon, right? The party gets to the Yawning Portal, okay? And they get word there's a guy in the corner who wants to hire them to go down to the northeast part of the first level and bring back his homunculus, okay? So they descend down the well and they search around the northeast side and they find the guy's homunculus and they come back. And again, they've got, the quest was given, a couple, 3 nights of play, and then they get their reward, right? But then maybe they return to the Yawning Portal, and the next guy says, hey, I want you to go down to the western part of level 3. There's a library down there that's got this powerful scroll that I want to get, right? So now the party descends back to level 1, right? And they're exploring level 1, they're trying to find stairs down to level 2, they're having some fights, they're having some encounters. Several nights go by. They finally found the steps down to level 2. Now they're down on level 2. And they're around here looking for the steps to level 3, right? And the nights of actual gameplay go on and on and on as they're trying to complete this one quest. This feels like a slog to modern players. After about the 6th night of having the same sort of quest in the upper left-hand corner of their screen, in their minds, they're going to start to feel like we could just draw this guy a scroll, right? I mean, we could just forget this guy. He said 1,000 gold pieces each. I don't even care anymore about this guy or his scroll, right? And I want to emphasize, this is nights of play. That's why I'm using a table symbol, okay? If you play twice a week, the players are not going to feel like they're making more progress. If you play once a month, it really doesn't matter. It's not about game time, and it's not about it's not about game time in the story or about how long are between sessions. I have found that players' brains kind of reset when they get up from the table, they go back to their regular lives, blah, 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 blah. They come back to the table to play. Their brains have kind of reset. And when they sit down, if they are still looking for stairs to the 3rd level of your mega dungeon, after 6 sessions, they feel like this has been a grind. And I can't stress this enough, guys. Even if the content is very, very good and interesting. This is the thing that some designers don't get necessarily about the gameplay loop. They think, well, as long as the players are having a blast, as long as every room is sort of interesting and it's loaded with kind of cool puzzles and cool encounters and NPCs, that's what the players are coming to the table for. The players are coming to the table to have a great experience. And they are. But we have been programmed by these video games that we want to have a feeling that the story is advancing. We want to have a feeling that we're getting somewhere. And let me illustrate this with another example. Take for a minute the Curse of Strahd, right? Let's say you're running Curse of Strahd, and you want to change things up a little bit. So the party reaches Barovia Village, right? And Ismark tells them he wants them to take Irina to Kresk or wherever it is that they're supposed to take her, right? So, okay, so we got an escort mission. We're going to take Irina. We're going to go to this next city over, and she's going to be someplace where Strahd can't reach her, right? The party accepts the quest. They have a night of gameplay on the road. Maybe they reach Kresk and they find out they're not allowed in unless they do something. They go, they do that something, and then Irina is at Kresk. The story moves forward, and we're on to the next thing, right? The next sort of sub quest appears in our heads up display, and we're going on. All right, imagine a different scenario. Imagine I have bought all of these products off the DM's Guild about Barovia road encounters, right? And I think these products are just aces. I think they're just fantastic. So I decide, these encounters are so good, I decide the party is going to have 16 encounters on the road from Barovia Village to Kresk, right? Again, if it takes this many nights to complete just the process of getting her from one village to another, first of all, there's a suspension of disbelief problem here. I get it, right? How are people getting between these two villages ever if there's this much stuff happening? But setting that aside, even if all of these encounters are really well written and really interesting, you're going to sit there as your players sit down for the fifth night to try to get Irina from one village to another. It doesn't matter how good your content is, they still are feeling frustrated. All right, so this is the problem, and this is the problem we can run into with mega dungeons, because we think of the mega dungeon and we're like, oh, we're going to give the party a reason why they want to go down into this huge sprawling mega dungeon, right? Maybe one player wants to rescue somebody from the prison on level 7, and maybe somebody wants some information from the library, or maybe we have 2 or 3 quest hooks in the nearby village of Otari where we can send them into the dungeon, right? The problem is we're still thinking in terms of this whole huge map, and again, the gameplay loop is out of sync. So, now that I've described the problem clearly enough, you can probably already guess what the solution is. In order to pull off a mega dungeon for modern players who have been programmed by other D&D adventures and by video games, just like me, you have got to break the mega dungeon up into manageable quests that can be completed over the space of a few nights. Now, I will say, you can, this is more important at the beginning of the campaign than it's going to be later in the campaign. Okay, as the campaign goes along, the players are more and more invested, and they're going to be less thrown off by sort of bigger quests that take more sessions to complete, right? Once they are medium to high level and they've invested a lot of time in the campaign and they're really like, okay, we need to go through all of the levels of this place, it's going to be easier for them to sort of have goals that take a lot more sessions to complete, especially because at higher levels, 5th edition just takes longer for anything to complete. But it's really at those early to mid levels that we've got to break things up. So this particular adventure that's just come out for 5th edition, Pathfinder's Abomination Vaults, has just been translated into 5th edition. This is a very good example of this, and this is going to be my next Ravenloft campaign that I'm going to be running for my Tuesday night group, where there are a series of quests that can take the players into the dungeon, and they go in, they find the thing in the northeast corner of the ruins, and they come back to Otari, okay? And then somebody says, oh, you found this in the ruins? You need to go back in there. There's probably a hidden thing in that statue where, you can find something else for me, right? So then they get into the dungeon somewhere, and then they start getting quests inside the dungeon, right? Boss Nass over here, can give them quests that, again, a couple sessions, they can complete that quest, they can come back out, and they feel like the story is constantly moving forward. Another thing that I've noticed in this dungeon, and it's in a few of the other more modern dungeons, designers like this idea of there are ways to teleport between the levels, okay? Designers like that very much. It exists in this, it's in the Emerald Spire. It's a thing they're doing now where basically once you've made it to the third level, you can unlock something that allows you just teleport to the third level, right? Which to me feels very much like the Diablo video game. It doesn't feel like old school dungeon crawling, but nice. Here, I got my own gibbering mouther to go with him. It's perfect. But whatever mega dungeon you're running, or if you're writing your own, it is so important to break up those first few forays into manageable bites that the party can come in, explore this little area, go back out, and feel like the story is moving forward. Something happened. They don't have to clear this whole area in order for the story to move forward. And again, once they are kind of committed and on board with this, it'll get a little easier as the story feels like it's kind of got its own momentum and stuff. And now they're starting to understand what's on the different levels, what's happening and why. Maybe they get involved in some of the factions, things like that. But we've got to figure out how to get our gameplay loop back in sort of perspective if we want to have our mega dungeons really come off as viable, exciting, memorable campaigns. So, hey, we really appreciate you sticking with us through this little bit longer than usual video. We would sure appreciate a comment and a like. It helps us get noticed on the algorithm. Maybe in the comments, tell me what one of your favorite mega dungeons is, and I'll tell you if it's one that I got a copy of, but it's just already packed for the move or whatever. And join us next time for the Henchman's Memoirs.